There's John Dean on the line with us. His most recent book, Broken Government. He writes over at findlaw.com. And John Dean, a number of our listeners have questions for you. I have a couple more, too. Do you mind picking up a few callers?
Sure, that's fine.
That would be great. Okay, Kathy in Detroit, you are on the air with John Dean.
Hi, Thom and Mr. Dean. My question is about the statute of limitations. If there's a statute of limitations on war crimes, how can they still be prosecuting people involved in what happened in Nazi Germany now? It's way past 8 years.
Thank you, Kathy.
The short answer is that every country has their own statute of limitations. Statute of limitations is unlimited for murder and for genocide on almost every country. So those are mostly the cases they're pursuing when they're looking for the Nazi war hunters or trying to find these people who've gone to Argentina and what have you. There is no statute of limitations. The statute of limitations for torture, typically, unless there is a death, 8 years. Some of the other crimes that could be federally prosecuted, which are really just simple assaults and things of that nature, or conspiracies, are 5 years. So it depends upon the offense, it depends upon the action, but there are limits, excepting when you get into these really horrendous crimes.
Richard in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you're on the air with John Dean. Our number, by the way, 866-987-THOM, 987-8466. Richard?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. John, I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to speak with you. In the beginning of your book, Conservatives Without Conscience, you talk a lot about how Newt Gingrich interacted with you and some of the things he did. And I'm just curious to hear about how you react to the latest statements after he was over in China and basically denounced, torture and talked about American ideals, but now he sits on the national TV and is becoming basically a national pundit now. A lot of people talking about possibly the next candidate for Republican president, and is now him and hawing and talking about how torture isn't, how about this isn't torture. I'm just curious what your reaction to that is.
Well, if you'll recall in that book, I described what the personality is really the authoritarian conservative. Newt, typical what they call double high. In other words, he if you tested him, he would ring the bell on a number of tests for his authoritarian type personality. This type personality will say whatever needs to be said wherever he is, and he thinks that it'll draw the attention of the audience, and he can indeed get that audience to follow him. He'll say it. So there's total inconsistency, or he will say what he thinks people want to hear, and that's what you're hearing from Newt right now.
It sounds like you're describing a sociopath. Jamie in Keene, New Hampshire, you're on the air with John Dean.
Mr. Dean, pleasure to talk to you. I have such a hard time with all this talk of torture and things of this sort. And it's a basic principle I have is what happened to sodium pentothal, and that was 30 years ago. Don't they have truth serums? And why do we never hear about them? Why is it always about torture? Well, there you go. Why?
As I understand, there is statutory prohibitions against injecting drugs into people to getting them to talk. And it's just that simple.
And they're not that much more effective than torture. I mean,
right.
They similarly dehumanize, and they similarly can destroy personality, and they similarly can be very harmful to the people who are doing them and to society as a whole. And it's another one of those huge kind of Pinochet-like slippery slopes. Putting on your Conservatives Without Conscience hat, Harry Reid just seems to faint dead away every time the Republicans mumble the word filibuster, yet the Democrats didn't try to filibuster the 2 Supreme Court nominations simply because they were threatened by Republicans. How do we give the Democrats a spine?
There's a lot of high hypocrisy on filibuster and the so-called nuclear option, which when the Republicans start rattling it, Democrats do melt. I mean, they just fear this. I think put them to the test, embarrass them, make them blow up the Senate, and the American people will notice suddenly the upper chamber no longer operates. Force that issue. I don't know why Reid is reluctant to go that distance and push them. I don't think they'll do it in the end. Just as when they were pushed to the brink last time, they backed down.
The Republicans?
Well, no, the Republicans didn't. The
Democrats did. Yeah.
Democrats did. But you know, the Senate is such a collegial body that it operates on a day-to-day basis largely through unanimous consent. And once that goes away, you know, Americans would notice it.
But it didn't when Trent Lott was running it.
No, he kept it going, and you know, to me, one of the great majority leaders was Mike Mansfield.
Yeah.
He created, but it's caused a problem today. What is now the two-track system for filibuster? In other words, it used to be when you wanted to filibuster, you literally had to filibuster. You had to go out, tie up the Senate, control the floor. Men had to use their motorman's pal to stay out there on the floor for untold hours, and they don't do that anymore. Now there's just the threat of it. Indeed, we'll put it on a second track, and they can keep business going.
I think we need to bring that back. I'd like to ask you how that might be done. If you can stick around for one more segment, and we've got a bunch of listeners who also would like to ask you a few questions if you're available, sir.
Sure.
Great. John Dean is with us. His writings over at findlaw.com. His most recent book, Broken Government. We'll be right back.